hard to see. See those little semicircles on the edges? Yeah, so they're like right here. I'll point to them. It's right here, kind of like this area right here, and then on this side too. So there should be 2 on each side. These are called channels. And what they are is that we can convince the spine to sound thicker and darker, but if we thin them out a little bit, just like we were up here, but just thin them out towards the dog ears, so you can actually work your way up. So we're going to do that. We're actually going to file that down towards the dog ears. You want to do them on both sides and on both sides of the reed. So there should be 4 spots you're aiming at right now. And this will help with the tapered texture, and this will help provide that thickness towards the spine. And that way the spine thinks like, oh hey, I'm like really thick. It's going to be this really nice dark sound. And that's what we want. We want that 70% cocoa or even 90% cocoa of chocolate. I know some of you aren't dark chocolate, but I love chocolate. That's what we want. We don't want that milk chocolate thin sound. No. So what you want to do is you just want to work on it and just file it. And like I said, it takes a while, and make sure to do both sides of the reed. It's very important. There's balance of the reed. If it's out of balance, it's going to sound bad because it doesn't know if it's thin or if it's thick. So it wants to make sure that it's all the same. So, like I said, we're going to work on the tip, the dog ears, and then the channels. But I will say, we are not touching the spine or even back here. Those channels only come up they probably start here, which is maybe like a 1/4 of an inch away from the collar. That's where you want to start. You do not want to start back here. We don't want to thin this out. This is the nice dark spine. The spine is this really nice area, all the way up. It even goes up to the tip sometimes. So you just want to make sure to thin that out a little bit and convince it that the spine is nice and thick. Okay? So keep doing that for a while. I'm actually going to move on to the next topic. Okay? So once you have that, we're going to discuss the wires. So this actually, now my reed's a little unbalanced right now, but it makes a sound. You can actually play it. Like I said, mine's unbalanced right now, and the tip, I'm not finished yet. It's really thick. But we're going to talk about how to manipulate the wires. This is really important. So now, technically, I can play on it. I still need to thin out the tip and actually put in the tip, technically, for right now. But if I'm already finished, we're good. And I can show this actually on a different reed. We're going to keep going on this one. So what we're going to do, now that you have a tip in, supposedly, and now that we have the spine that thinks it's nice and dark, you can actually play on it right now. But we will want to talk about, so it takes about a week and a half to actually break in a reed. So this is a reed. This is a working reed now. But it still has to break in. So it takes at least a week and a half to break in before you actually can play it in public. So you want to use these just to practice, and don't worry about intonation or how it sounds, just play. It's all you want to do is just play. And I will tell you, reeds change constantly. Now that you've actually made it into a reed, it may not be at its peak anymore. It may start dying already, and by dying, that can last a day, it can last like a month. It really depends. This is why you want to actually have multiple reeds on rotation. At least 3. 3 is a minimum you should have on rotation, like if you use them all the time. That's why you want to have them. That way if one dies or one breaks or cracks. So you have this reed and you're breaking it in, but then you realize like, oh, it really sounds bad. Now, this is after you've broken it in. So it's been at least a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, at least, maybe a fortnight, if you know what that is. We want to keep going. But the issue is you've started to realize, like, oh, there's a tendency to be really sharp. And I'll talk about it actually right now. Like, what do you test for? How do you know it's actually a working reed? But before I get there, I just want to mention again, it does take time. Feel free to break it in for a while first. This is what it needs. And yeah, so let's say we're ready to play. What do we test it? How do you know it's a working reed? So what you do first is on your bassoon, you'll put this on and you'll play. And what you do is you do a tonguing exercise. Whatever tonguing exercise you want to do, it can even just be playing quarter notes, whatever. And then gradually to 30-second notes if you can play that. But the point is you want to test, the first thing you want to test for is tonguing. Now if it's not tonguing, you can thin it out again. thin out the tip. Remember how I said once you start thinning, you always keep thinking how to read, whether it's sandpaper or a file or even actual blade. So depending on how much you want. But remember, like I've talked about this whole time, once you take off, you can never put it back on. So you want to be very gradual in how you do it, very slow and be considerate. So if your tonguing is not working, it's really like ta 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 instead of da 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 da. What you can do is actually you can thin out the reed. I would sandpaper first. Yeah, sandpaper. Another note about the reed itself, when you're playing, you actually transfer any fat you have in your lip, or whatever you have on your lip, whether it's dead skin cells, or chicken fat from eating that, or if you don't eat meat, whatever, you can have all these fats actually go into the reed. So as a general maintenance, what you always want to do is just have sandpaper with you in practice. You can just quickly like sandpaper it on occasion, like maybe like once a week or so, and just go ahead and sandpaper. But back to the testing. So you have a reed and you did tonguing and it's fast, or if it didn't, you thin out your reed a little bit. I would do sandpaper for a while and see if that helps. And make sure to do both sides of the reed. So test number 1, tonguing. Yay, it passed. Test number 2. Let's see how a couple notes play. So there's 2 notes we like to test for. The first one is E2, which is E in the staff, or C sharp 2, which is the C sharp below the second. So the 2 notes that are, so you have E in the staff, then you have C sharp right below it. Okay, so what you'll do is you'll play those notes, and you'll just play them straight. Do not think about playing, because remember, as a bassoon player, your embouchure can actually drastically change on how your sound plays. So just play straight. Don't concentrate, just play straight on those 2 notes. If it's totally fine, you keep going, we'll go on to the 3rd test. If it's not, which it sags a little bit, which means it's a little flat, and a little being more than just 2 cents flat, what you will do, first things first, check your wires. It might be something as simple as tightening them. So go ahead, flip back. I know they're pushed down right now, but you can just pull those back up, see if they're loose. Go ahead and pull and twist like we've been doing. If that doesn't work, we can talk about wire manipulation in 1 second, which we'll do. So check wires, see if they're tight. If it's not working, we can do wire manipulation, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then see if it's thin. You might need to thin it out again. And if nothing is working at all after all of that, then the drastic and last resort is actually to cut off just a little bit. And so you would just go back and cut off just a sliver, probably not even a millimeter. It's not really that much. You would just cut off just a little, excuse me, and then you will actually have to go back and re-put it and like thin it out again. Not too much, but just a little. Another part of thinning trick that I forgot to mention, if you can sandpaper and file and you're working on the dog ears, the channels again, another last minute resort is actually working on the collar. You can bring back the collar just a little by just peeling back the bark with your knife a little bit, but that's again last resort. I would say that's the resort before cutting. So again, so for test number 2, you're testing 2 different notes, so test 2 notes. There's E2 and C sharp 2, and if they're flat or if they're sagging a lot, thin it out. Check the wires first, so see if they're tight, see if you need to manipulate them and how I will describe in a few minutes, and then if you have to thin out the wire or thin out the tip or bring back the collar, and then the absolutely last emergency would be to cut it actually. Okay, so now we have sagging, so we have 3 tests, and so the 3rd one actually is if the sharpness of the low register, and this one's kind of hard to gauge, but the low register, and that's anywhere from your E flat, your first E flat, all the way down to your beautiful B flat, that which we all